Hello again, everyone. I hope you're still caffeinated. Welcome back. We're delighted to have you here for this year's industry conference presented by Christie Digital at the 50th Toronto International Film Festival, presented by Rogers. As you might know already, I am Jeff McNaughton. I'm TIFF's Vice President of Industry and Theatrical, and I'm also the programmer of Prime Time. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our next session. It's a Visionaries with Sterlin Harjo, presented by the Indigenous Screen Office. Sterlin is an award-winning filmmaker, director, and showrunner whose work has taken the industry by storm, cemented in the success of FX's Reservation Dogs. Sterlin has the unique ability to balance artistic integrity with broad audience appeal, establishing him as one of today's most innovative creators. If you haven't seen it yet, The Lowdown is playing at TIFF. The reviews are incredible. You have to see it. Guiding this conversation is the Hollywood reporter Scott Roxborough. This conversation will delve into Sterlin's transformative impact on the industry, his strategies for fostering authentic and emerging voices, and the vision behind his latest series, as I mentioned, The Lowdown. Please note that The Lowdown has its world premiere as part of the primetime section that I program, and there is a public screening tomorrow at 7 p.m. at the Scotiabank. All of our programming is made possible by the support of our sponsors and partners. A sincere thank you to our presenting sponsor, Rogers, our major sponsors, RBC and Visa, and our major industry supporters, Ontario Creates and Telefilm Canada. Finally, big thanks to our media partner, The Hollywood Reporter, for supporting the Visionaries program as a whole. However, before I begin, I'd like to welcome a friend of TIFF and the Chief Executive Officer of the Indigenous Screen Office, Carrie Swanson, to deliver a few remarks.
Thank you, Jeff. For those of you who are not familiar with the Indigenous Screen Office, we are Canada's funding agency for Indigenous storytelling on screen, with a mandate to foster narrative sovereignty in storytelling. What a great honor it is for me to welcome you all to this visionary session with Sterlin Harjo. We jumped at the opportunity to sponsor this session because Sterlin is a valued and loved member of the global Indigenous filmmaking community and family that we are part of at ISO. I first met Sterlin about 20 years ago now at the Imaginative Film Festival here in Toronto, where I worked at the time with Dennis Goulet. Shout out to Dennis, who is a director on The Lowdown, as well as on Reservation Dogs. At that time, I'm going to be honest, no one in this industry really cared about Indigenous storytelling on screen, and there was definitely no money for it. This gave creators the freedom to experiment, take risks, have fun, and forge lasting bonds with one another across borders. ISO has 8 feature films at TIFF this year from Canada. Yes. Many of you are here in the audience, no doubt, and many of you are Sterlin's peers, and we all came up together in this industry. The rise of Indigenous storytelling on screen did not come out of nowhere. It didn't happen overnight. It is the result of decades of advocacy, work, and commitment, and the unfailing belief that what we were doing was and is meaningful and necessary. At the premiere of The Lowdown last night, Sterlin shared some beautiful words about Graham Greene, an icon whose loss is felt across Turtle Island. He was a true legend, and we at ISO acknowledged that our path was made possible by elders like Graham. And now, I'm going to introduce the person we're here to listen to today. Just to expand a little on the bio, Sterlin Harjo is an award-winning writer, director, producer, and documentarian. He is best known as co-creator and showrunner of the groundbreaking series Reservation Dogs, which brought Indigenous life and humor to mainstream audiences with authenticity and brilliance. His body of work spanning film, TV, and beyond has redefined Indigenous storytelling and what it can look like on screen while inspiring audiences around the world. This year, Sterlin brings to TIFF the world premiere of The Lowdown, a captivating new noir drama set in Tulsa, Oklahoma, of course, with an ensemble cast led by Ethan Hawke. The Lowdown is an ode to classic noir and a powerful exploration of family, corruption, and community. It's another example of how Sterlin's storytelling transports us into worlds that are both deeply local and universally resonant. It is a true privilege to have him here today and to share his vision, his journey, and his wisdom with us. Please join me in welcoming Scott Roxborough and Sterlin Harjo to the stage.
Hello. Hello.
And hello.
Just listening to Tragically Hip in the back.
I shouldn't say this because what starts said in the green room stays in the green room, but Sterlin was just giving his opinions of the hip earlier. And
Don't lie on me. This is a room full of Canadians that would throw me out of here. I was talking about how whenever I have Canadian directors and or actors on my shows, I play, because I always have like a speaker that I play for everyone. And Dennis, when Dennis's day one of directing episode, I played Bob Cajun on the thing, and it was like angels lifted her into the air, and she just started gliding and singing along, and production stopped, you know. So, yeah.
I just seem to remember them being compared unfavorably to some other great Canadian.
No, here's what I was saying. Since we have to do this now, I love Tragically Hip. I think they're great. But I was like kind of saying, I'm a little there's also like Neil Young and Leonard Cohen and the band and some really amazing music that come out here. None of them stop the show, like playing Bob Cajun. And I was just asking why. Why is that? Like you play like Suzanne by Leonard Cohen, and it's not like Dennis does not get lifted and float through the space, but if you play Tragically Hip, she does. So it's just, just curious.
Yeah, I think you just have to grow up here to understand. Thank you all for coming. My name's Scott Roxborough. I'm the European Bureau Chief of the Hollywood Reporter. Live in Europe, but I did grow up here on the East Coast in New Brunswick. Basically, I'll start the conversation, but we want to leave like 15, 20 minutes at the end for your questions. So think about what you want to ask Sterlin, and I'll get to that at the end. Actually, because you just mentioned it, I wonder if you could share a bit of, because we lost Graham Greene, who was a huge figure here, but I think globally as well. What did he mean to you? What was sort of your the strongest memory that you have of him when you think of him now?
I mean, the strongest memory I have is just being represented for the first time, seeing the humanity that he brought to his character in Dances with Wolves, and what I imagine and what I hope that Reservation Dogs does to lots of young people in Native communities. The idea of being able to like look on screen and see something that you recognize reflected back at you. I mean, it's so huge, and Graham was that person, for a lot of us. I think of like Thunderheart. It's like, you just can't. I mean, that movie like formed me, and he's so funny in it. And I think that I was lucky enough to work with him, Reservation Dogs. And, he played this character Maximus in Reservation Dogs, and I think it's really beautiful that how much humanity he brought to someone suffering from mental illness. I think that there's a way that you could show that in a way that is kind of like what people usually do, but what Graham did, it was like he made you love him more. He brought his vulnerabilities with that performance, and it made you actually like recognize that character as someone we all know and a family member that we all know. Similar, like I can't give away what he is in this show, but he's in the Lowdown, and he's a part of 2 episodes, and he's part of 2 episodes, but he's actually way bigger than that in the show. Like he sort of like once he's there, he's hanging over the whole show. And if I tell you why, it'll give things away. But you know, he came in and just was amazing. You know, like, I mean, the choices that he made and some of the things that he did. And, you know, I told the story last night, but he had his hat was like cocked off to the side, like a cool guy. And we were like, we were about to shoot. He's like, you want to straighten your hat? And he was like, no, what are you talking about? I was like, okay. He's like, then the lighting guy's got to do things. Like, I don't want to give him more work to do. You know, he was like such a professional. He was concerned about the gaffer having to light under his ball cap. He's like, no, I'm gonna wear it like this, and he did the whole time. Yeah, he was just an amazing person, and really honored to, you know, privileged to work with him.
Can I ask, because mentioned about representation, you're a bit younger than I am, but I assume that growing up we watched a lot of the same things, TV and film. That was sort of what was out there, was a sort of limited group of things that were available to see and to watch. What was it like for you? What were sort of the, I don't know, formative influences for you growing up? Because it seems, in terms of film and TV, I'm also really interested in how you, I don't know, how you saw Native communities represented, and how that, I don't know, changed or altered you in turn when you came to telling stories from your own community.
Yeah, I mean, my first sort of, the things that I watched first were, I mean, it's crazy. Like, I was not censored at all. I could watch anything. And like my favorite movies, it was a range of like Howard the Duck, Stand By Me, The Deer Hunter, Platoon, Lost Boys. I mean, you totally know how old I am by just the list that I'm giving you. The Lost Boys. I mean, The Deer Hunter was huge for me. I was watching it the other day and just thinking about me as a young person watching The Deer Hunter. I'm like, why would my dad show me that? First of all, and like, why would I? It was like it's like a 3.5 hour movie or something, or maybe I can't remember, but it's heavy. Like, it's so heavy. And I was just like, I've watched it so many times. And one of my favorite compliments was when I made this film, Four Sheets to the Wind, and afterwards, at the festival, after it screened, my dad was like, yeah, you know, it reminded me of Deer Hunter. And like, it's not like Deer Hunter at all, other than, like, I knew what he was saying, though. It was the pacing and the tone had something in there that he recognized. And that something is what I've kind of been chasing, I think, in my work forever. And so The Deer Hunter was big. You know what else was big was the making of Michael Jackson's Thriller, because you really know how old I am now, but like, that was the first time I realized people actually made this stuff, you know? And I watched it the other day, and I know every word of it. That's how much I watched it. Like, I was like saying what they're gonna say before they said it. And it was just a big, you know, it was also like a person of color that was like, you know, at the top of his game, and like, you know, and then he was like becoming a werewolf, and John Landis, and like all the makeup that went into that, and the behind the scenes and the choreography and all of that had a big impact on me. Native representation. You snuck in 2 questions.
I did sneak in 2 questions.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. I was wondering, because of the stuff that you were watching, obviously, the big mainstream thing that everyone was seeing, do you remember seeing representations on screen and reacting to that at that time?
Yeah, we mostly like kind of humorous. You know, we would laugh about stuff. Like, I remember my dad calling me into the living room one day, and he was like, "Hey, I'm Seminole," and he was like, "There's a movie about Seminoles on. It was called Seminole War or something like that." And they were all dressed as Lakotas, and we could sort of get the humor in that, you know, but it was still cool. It was still like, but we're still being represented, you know, like. So that was about the extent that I remember as a kid. I just didn't think we were ever going to be represented in the way that I saw other people represented on screen. I just didn't think it would be possible. It didn't even cross my mind. But what What I did know is that my family were some of the best storytellers I knew. And I listened and I absorbed their stories. And I found myself, basically I started telling stories like them. I started telling stories like them, and I started, without knowing I was doing this, like learning how to take something that was very mundane and make it amazing, you know? And it's like, I think because it was such a small community, going to the grocery store was like was a great story, you know? It was like who you ran into, what happened to your car on the way, what they were out of at the store, what gossip you heard while you were there, what hurt on your body while you're walking around there. You know, it's like all of these things become magnified and bigger. And that was sort of what I was after. And luckily, I'm really grateful that I didn't make a big hit movie when I was 23 or whatever, because it allowed me to just kind of hone a style and my voice for, you know, a lot of films until Reservation Dogs came. So.
Yeah, of course, could talk about Reservation Dogs, but I would like to ask, because you've stayed in Oklahoma, despite, I'm sure, a lot of offers to move to Hollywood, to move to New York. What has that meant for you in terms of connection to your community, but also to the kinds of stories you want to tell and the way you want to tell them? Do you think you would have been able to tell the stories how you have if you had left, if you had gone away?
No, I mean, like when you see the Lowdown and Reservation Dogs, like every location, every scene, every character has something to do with my life, or a place that I've, you know, hung out in. I mean, like, you know, it's like, I knew that there, you know, if you see the Lowdown, there's a scene that takes place at a cattle auction. You'd never think of shooting at a cattle auction unless you were in a community that had a cattle auction with an auctioneer that's selling. You know, it's like, I was like, what if we set it there? It was like, I don't know, like everything just, I don't have to shoot things there, but it actually helps storytelling, I think, that I know it so well, you know? The Reservation Dogs, I mean, it's crazy how much comes from my life in that, you know? I mean, like, the episode where Mabel, that was, you know, co-written by Deborah Jacobs, where she's passing away. I was like, I mean, that was my grandma. Like, it was like the story of my grandma, like, and us hanging out while she was passing away, and there was, I mean, like, even the details, though, like, there's this moment where Zahn McClarnon's character, Big, the cop, comes in, and he's got squash, and it's a big squash, and he hands it to Willie Jack and says, here, like, as he walks in, she goes, what do you mean to do with this? He's like, fuck, I don't know, cook it up. And then he walks off. I mean, like, that story specifically, like, that story, like, you know, that character, Zahn's character, he was very paranoid about Indian medicine and things like that. That was inspired by my great uncle, my uncle Junior. And, you know, one day, and Ryan Redcorn, I'm sure some of you know who he is. Ryan Redcorn, sorry Ryan, but Ryan Redcorn, let's just say he's very light-skinned, and he's an Osage man. He knew the stories of my uncle, my uncle being very paranoid about medicine and someone sort of witching him or whatever. And so we're all there when my grandma's passing away, and we're eating, and there's people singing songs, and we're hanging out, and Ryan shows up to pay his respects. He knew my grandma, but he had never met my uncle. And my uncle's sitting in the front room telling a story. And so I see Ryan pull up. I go outside, and Ryan comes out with a squash that's like this long, like that big. It was insane. It's the biggest squash I've ever seen. And he's like carrying it. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, you cook it. It's a squash. And I was like, all right, when you walk in, just take this squash. I was like, Uncle Junior's in there, and he's sitting right when you walk in the door. He's sitting in the chair across the room. I was like, right when you walk in, just hand it to him and walk away. And he was like, all right. And he knew how paranoid my uncle was, so he was like, all right, I'm on it. And so he walks in, And he just walks in with this squash, and he walks up to my uncle, and he just hands it. My uncle's like mid-story, and he talks with his hands, and then he sees Ryan with this big squash, and he just takes his squash in his hand, and Ryan does this and then walks off. And he's sitting there like looking around, and then Ryan's saying hi to other people, my aunts and stuff that he knows. And I was watching my Uncle Junior, and my Uncle Junior like looked over at someone, and he leaned over, and he's like, "Why do you think that white man gave me this squash?" It's so funny. But it's like little moments like that find their way into the stories, you know? And I think that I'm just like a very observational person. I don't know, you know? Yeah.
Did you have any idea when you made Reservation Dogs how seminal it would be, how transformative it would be? I mean, it was the first show which had an all Indigenous writing staff, right? And which was, you know, seemingly unheard of at the time, surprisingly. I mean, did you guys have an idea what you were doing and how transformative it would be?
Well, we had no idea what we were doing, for sure. No, I mean, there's no way to know, I don't think, you know? But I'd learned enough of doing things, making films. And some of those films are successful to me, some of them aren't. And most of the time when they weren't successful to me, I was afraid. And with Reservation Dogs, I needed to not be afraid. And it kind of came at the right time in my career where I had nothing to lose. And it was important just to swing for the fences on that and just say, this is what, you know, it could be one shot. And I always think of the Eminem song when I say this, but it could just be...
If you start rapping, we'll all cheer.
When I start rapping, he comes out. Yeah, I just had one shot to do this. And, you know, mom's spaghetti.
Did they beat that?
No, and it was like, just go for it. You know, what do you have to lose? I keep saying lyrics to the song. And it was just like, you just have to go for it. And, you know, and I think I learned from that to keep doing that, you know? Like, I mean, it's so easy to think back on it and be like, I mean, but it's always hard, but it's like, you think back on it and it's like, of course all that needed to happen. But it took a lot of people fighting for that to happen, for it to happen. But if you don't say it in the first place, if you don't speak the words into existence, that we should have an all-native writer's room. I mean, I said that to FX, and it wasn't, oh, no, we can't do that. It was, oh, okay, well, who would it be? And then I said I could staff this writer's room like double. I could do this twice. That's how many great writers there are. And so, you know, there's a bit of like trust, education, and collaboration that you have to be ready to do to make change. And that's sort of, you know, that's what happened.
And so how much has changed since then? I mean, you opened up the doors, I think, for a lot of people, native writers and artists to maybe get a chance in this industry. How much has changed since, you know, when you started with Reservation? And I'd also like to know what hasn't changed, what's still, where the problems still are.
I feel like it's changed so much. I see it in everyday things, like, because I was paying attention to, I think, the culture and what was happening. And, you know, what I did before Reservation Dogs, one of the things I did is with the comedy group, the 1491s, and a lot of us went on to Reservation Dogs and worked on it. But we traveled around to reservations and communities in Canada, and also, you know, mainly the United States. We also made our way to Canada. And so we got to know a lot of people and a lot of Indigenous people, and really kind of like, I don't know, check the pulse on community and like what it was like everywhere. And I know that after Reservation Dogs, I saw an empowerment that I think happened where, you know, people were proud and young people weren't as afraid to sing whatever song they have to sing or dance or be a fashion designer or be a filmmaker or be an artist. It just is empowering, you know? And that's all that anyone needs, is to be empowered to do something. It's not giving you the opportunity, it's not giving you lessons on how to do it, but it is empowering you to do what you can do, like what you know that you're capable of. And I think that just giving people the confidence to say, oh no, I'm a filmmaker, oh no, I'm a fashion designer. I mean, that in itself is really big and can change culture. And so I've seen evidence of that since Reservation Dogs came out. And Reservation Dogs wasn't the only thing that ever happened. It just happened to be the right time, the right situation, and all of that. But, you know, you're thinking of Graham and everybody that came before. There's so many people that made work and got us brave enough, got me brave enough to say, oh, we can have an all-Indigenous writers' room. You know, well, that's because of people like Graham Greene and people that came before us, breaking down doors and facing racism and facing systemic racism and, you know, not getting frustrated with that and quitting, but navigating that and showing us how to move through it and move forward. And I think that empowered me to do Reservation Dogs. And I think Reservation Dogs has also empowered other people to do things. So, you know, I just see it as that it did change the world that I'm from, you know, and I think that it's a wonderful thing. And it wasn't just me, it was a lot of people. It was the actors, it was, you know, happened to be a lot of Canadians, you know, and, you know, a lot of people helped change our world, I guess. But I can't, you know, people are gonna always say, oh, there's not enough of these films being made, or there's not enough of that, or whatever. But like, it's all a fight, and it's all like, you just have to keep pushing, and you know, things will ebb and flow. But I think it's changed. It'll never go back to being the same. There will never be a Native kid that grows up without seeing someone that reflects them on screen, and that's crazy. That's something I never had growing up. So, I mean, that in itself is huge.
No, and because I did want to ask if you're still getting like idiotic notes from studio executives when you're pitching a show.
Shh, they're here. They're sitting near the front row. It's great notes. It's amazing. It's great notes.
They're all lovely. We also love every studio executive that has ever existed. No,
Great partners.
Yeah, they're amazing.
I mean, I am lucky. Like, it's been amazing. I think you should get notes. You know, unless you're a psychopath, like, you have to get notes. This is a collaborative process. There is a lot of things that you have to do. Herzog, you know, you might think Herzog doesn't take notes. There's someone talking to him about something. He's like, you don't think that's good? And they're like, no, it could be better. And he's like, damn. You know, like, it's a collaborative process that, like, you have to, but I think it's about finding the right relationship, you know? They trust me and I trust them. And so I do take some of their notes. Some notes I'll fight back. And they trust me enough to say, okay, like, he's really fighting for this. We trust him enough that there's a reason for that. So, you know, I think it's so important. I think a lot of times that we get in these modes of everyone's kind of fighting against us and we have to go to battle. But sometimes we don't. Like, sometimes we just need to have a conversation and find a medium ground to work with people, and things get done that way. You know, I just think that you know, if you're wanting to be a soul artist, like, you know, be a painter. Like this is a collaborative medium.
Yeah, having interviewed Ben Herzog a few times, I think he only takes notes from God, or the voice of nature. I don't know. I'd be terrified to give that man notes. Anyway.
The trees are screaming.
They are speaking to me. Yeah.
They are screaming. And have you looked in a chicken's eyes? The stupidity that's reflected back at you.
You can keep going. I'm fine with that.
Mom spaghetti. Mom spaghetti. That was Arnold.
That's an easy crossover from Bavarian to Austrian. Can I ask, with your new show, The Lowdown, stars Ethan Hawke, who appeared in Reservation Dogs. Did it come about through that collaboration? I mean, where did this story, sort of the idea for it, originate? And maybe just give a really brief idea of what it is.
So Ethan and I met. He had a. We were introduced by the actor Martin Sinsmeyer. They were in Magnificent Seven together. It's not 8. That was the next one. I don't know. And he's like, "Have you ever read Ethan's graphic novel?" And I was like, "No." And he said, "Well, it's about the Apache Wars." He was like, "I think it'd be a good show." And I read it, and I was like, "Oh, I could like totally do something with this." And I was like, "Interesting that Ethan Hawke is writing about the Apache Wars. I wonder what brought him to it, you know?" And I had this idea of it being the show being, it should be made. It's great. FX didn't want to make it, but there are some executives here, so maybe they could revitalize it. But for me, it was about who gets to tell your story, right? Who gets to tell whose story? And I invented this thing, a framework to do it as a TV show of this character that I was going to get to be played by Ethan in the show. And if you know anything about Geronimo, his autobiography is fascinating. It is just laid out so matter of fact, and it's just marching through life. Like he's like, you know, it's like, we don't eat fish because of this reason. We gathered our medicines here. We prepared for war. Like, you know, it's just like telling you what life is, and it's like really long. He wanted to do that to the president of the United and let the president of the United States read that, so that the president of the United States might allow him and his people to go from the Fort Sill prison to military prison to their homelands. He was thinking, if I just give this person our story, they will realize that we are just people, and they will let us go home. They're reasonable people, you know. And the person that wrote it, he dictated it. The person that wrote it was this colonel or whatever in the U.S. military. I told Ethan I would like to frame it in a way that Geronimo is dictating the story to this white man who is, you know, a soldier. And it's about him trying to convince Geronimo to do it, and Geronimo also trying to get what he wants out of it as well. And his goal is to go home. And so Ethan loved that framework and how it was going to be. And so the whole story behind Ethan's graphic novel is that he had written a script. He really into history, really into Apache history. His father had taken him to the reservation, and he had just like immersed himself in the history and was like, there's this movie about Geronimo, but it's more about the white guys. It's more about the soldiers. Like, this should be more about like the Apache people. And so he did a lot of research, wrote a script. No one would make it in Hollywood because they were like, it has to have, you got to cast the generals, you know, cast famous white actors to play the generals. And he's like, that movie's been made. So out of frustration, he just turned it into a graphic novel, had an artist do the work, and then he put it out just so he could get it out. And so that's how we met as collaborators, and we started writing this show together. And we got along so well. I mean, we're just like, you know, we kind of speak each other's language a bit. And then, you know, he was a big fan of Reservation Dogs, and then season 2 was coming. He's like, man, if there's ever a part for me, let me know. And I was like, well, I'll just write a part for you. And so I wrote, you know, it was like, he's got to be Alora's dad. And then I directed him in that episode, and really loved working with him. And then I had this script, and I wanted to do a noir. I wanted to do a crime show, and I sent him the script. It was a little bit younger. The character was written as younger, and he wrote me back. I asked him to get notes, but I was really wanting him to want to play the guy. And he wrote me back and was like, oh, this is great, man. If I was a little bit younger, I'd play. I was like, I can change that, like, really easily. Like, I could just delete and write the age in there. And so I did. And then I wrote it sort of more tailored to Ethan, and that's where it happened.
Well, maybe throw it to the audience. We've been dominating the conversation. I just get caught up here. Do you have any questions for someone? Just put your hand up and enunciate, because we don't have mics. Yeah, please, just stand up and speak clearly.
How you doing? Thank you so much. I love the energy and the story.
My energy? Thank you. Thank you.
Fellow writer, nowhere near your stature, no confusion.
It's okay. Yeah.
So I've written a dark comedy series called Talk Dirty to Me about the first male phone sex operator. Neat hook, high concept, trying to get some traction with it. And my question to you, if you go back, because I think we're similar vintage, if you go back and report yourself to today as a newbie, trying to break in unrepresented, what guidance do you have for people like myself to actually get some traction?
I mean, it's just do it as much as you can, and it's painful, and you want to quit, and there is no one way to do it. Everyone does it differently. There was a lot of times that I didn't know how to make a living doing this, you know? Like, there was a lot of years where I was at Imaginative or TIFF showing films, you know, flat broke and not knowing what I was going to do to make a living. And some of that is in the new show. It's like about this journalist, and he doesn't quite make a living, and he's got to be a dad. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And I even, I was about to quit, and I was going to start a nonprofit. I'd been like traveling through the Northwest, and I met all of these natives that had like, there were like organizations of like, where they taught the youth how to like basically salmon fish again. But then that became a food exchange, teaching elders how to basically harvest and cook salmon again, you know, make it part of their diet. So I had this idea. I was like, I'm going to do that with deer hunting, like hunting. I want to just like go home and do that. Like, I can't make a living at this. And that's when I got my first job. Right then was when I got my first job in TV. And I was a consulting producer on a show that I'm glad didn't get made. You know, but it, you know, it led me to other things. And so there's no way to, I don't know. I think it's a fantasy that is somehow pushed in our industry where there's like, you know, I'm going to get it to the right. I mean, it does happen, but it's like there's no one person you can just like slip them a script and then it's like, bam, you know, like you've made it to Hollywood, baby. It just doesn't happen that way. I had to fight for it and just, you know, I was beat up. I was beat up like the character in the Lowdown at the end of the pilot. And that's how I felt.
I think we are so over time, but I think we have time for one or maybe two short questions. One, yeah, in the back.
Hi there. I just came from watching the Lowdown. I'm so excited to watch the rest of it, and I was wondering, how do you solve the mystery? Like, in the process of writing a mystery, how do you find the idea and then go, oh, what if, to the point where it's solved, or do you have the solution?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if this, I don't even know if I should answer it this way or I should lie. But truly what happened was I wrote myself into a corner in the pilot. I had no idea how it was going to unfold. And which is crazy to think about. But it's kind of rad because then I got a writer's room together and I had to solve my own mystery. And it could be solved many ways. But I had to solve it in the way that felt true. And it worked, you know. It was brutal. There were many different endings. It was one of the harder writers' rooms. I mean, it was harder than Reservation Dogs. I was banging my head against the wall, like, for months. Like, this is not going to work. And I tend to, like, sometimes I'll, like, take an edible at night and then have a panic attack that the show's not going to get made and I'm not going to finish it. Then it'll spark an idea out of desperation or something, and then I'll be at 4 a.m. I'll be writing it down, and you know, I have to get my like chemical balance right. You know, like it's just like I have to like, you know, it's like maybe driving down a dirt road with the windows down will help. You know, so I wrote myself into a corner. and which was cool because then it was a mystery to me, and I had to figure the mystery out myself as I wrote the rest of the script. So, yeah. I don't know if I recommend that, but that's what I do.
I was just going to say that seems to suggest that Canada's legalization of marijuana will spark a creative boom in our industry, which I'm really hopeful for. Terribly sorry, but we have to end it there. We're running over. Thank you so much for coming. Big applause for Sterlin Harjo.
Thank you.